According to the U.S. Census, in just a few decades, there will be more senior citizens living in the United States than children and teenagers. That will be a first. With people living longer, what can seniors do to ensure they have the best quality of life possible? And what challenges do they face trying to achieve that goal? I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Up next on Another View, we'll talk about senior life right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African American perspective, this is Another View.
And hello, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. If you've ever given any thought to your own life expectancy, chew on this. People are living much longer. According to the U.S. Census projections, in just 40 years, senior citizens will outnumber the children. So what can we do to ensure that those golden years truly are golden? Just look around you and you'll see that this segment of the population doesn't mind being active, but they also face their share of challenges. Joining us in today's discussion is Brenda Miller, a senior who works every day in Chesapeake Public Schools and is currently working on her PhD, which focuses on living life as a senior. Hi, how are you, Brenda?
Fine, how are you?
Very great. Thanks so much for joining us. And Dr. Darnell Johnson, another senior who gets up and goes to work every day in his role as a professor at Elizabeth City State University. Hi, Darnell. How are you?
Hello. Doing great.
Good. Glad to have you with us. And joining us by phone is gerontologist and theologian, Dr. Joseph Dancy. Hi, Dr. Dancy. How are you?
Hello?
Hi, there you are. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Fine, thank you.
So glad to have you on the show with us today. So first of all, let me ask you I'm going to start with you, Brenda.
Okay.
Do you like being called a senior?
I'm glad to be here, so I'm thankful for that. But I think the activities that I'm a part of, it's not the norm, but I enjoy being here.
Okay.
And a senior in that sense.
And do you have a problem, Darnell, calling yourself a senior?
No problem.
No
whatsoever.
problem at all. Okay. What about you, Joseph?
I have no problem being called senior. There are many terms that are used to describe seniors, and with each term, it carries its own luggage of affirmation or stereotypes.
Yes.
If it's a matter of stereotypes, no, I don't like it. If it's an affirmation, yes, I like it.
I got you. Okay, let me hear your story, Brenda. Tell us how old you are and what you're up to, first of all.
All right. I'm 70 years old, and I'm a resident of Portsmouth currently. Mm-hmm. I've been working on the PhD for several years. It's been a bumpy road, but I'm still involved. And I'm looking forward to this research because I think it's vital, because my research is in terms of older African American women.
Mm-hmm. And we'll talk about some of the things that you're finding out. But you're also still teaching, right?
I am still a school social worker with the Chesapeake Public Schools. Mm-hmm. I'm on a substitute status at this point, but I work every day.
So you get up every morning. Now, most people would say at 70 years old, I want to be sitting back, in the rocking chair. No?
No, I'm not ready to retire.
And I think that's one thing about the baby boomers. Darnell, what's your story? How old are you and what are you doing?
I'm 62 and enjoying life to its fullest.
And see, I'm closer to your age, and I don't know if I'm thinking I'm a senior yet.
Well, I'm called doctor all the time, but I've had several roles, and I've just enjoyed the educational aspect. In fact, in May, my wife and I will have participated in 80 years of service.
Wow.
To public education.
That's fantastic.
Both 40 years. And so that's great.
And so now you're teaching at Elizabeth City.
Yes.
And
I'm a
tell us what
professor
you're
there in the School of Education and Psychology. And I serve as one of the instructors for school administration. So we prepare persons that want to be school administrators. And I also work with the STEM program. So we work with science, technology, education, and math. And I work with graduate and undergraduate research and many varied committees that's assigned me. But it's my alma mater, so it's a privilege.
So you could have retired. Well, actually, you've retired twice.
I've retired twice. As a principal of Churchland Middle School from Portsmouth Schools after 30 years. I was a math teacher and school administrator. Then at Elizabeth City, 5 years as the chair of math and computer science. Hampton, assistant dean education, and I went back as an endowed professor at Elizabeth City State University, my lovely alma mater.
So no grass growing under your feet either.
No grass.
Joseph, now you've written books and you're a theologian and you're a gerontologist. What is all of this activity saying about our seniors today?
It's saying that we have individuality with persons. Just because someone is an older adult, a senior, you cannot put them in a cookie-cutter mold of perception. We are growing older. We are increasing in this regard, but each person is particular, individual. Mm-hmm. And we are finding that in the early 70s, persons are still active, as Mrs. Miller stated, still involved. In fact, it was Dr. Bernice Newgarden, I believe, out of Chicago, who looked at the growth of the elderly population in our society and stratified them in terms of the young old, the mid-old, and the old. And believe it or not, the oldest, fastest group growing of the elderly are the old. And they are the ones who are 85 plus.
Mm-hmm. I just hope that I can live to that point. So my question is, though, so a lot of times people say age is a matter of the mind and the way that you think about yourself. So I want to ask you, Joseph, what makes the baby boomer generation different from, say, the generation before, the greatest generation, as they called, the World War II generation? Because it seems like this baby boomer generation is much more active and much more engaged and really wants to continue to stay that way.
Well, with each generation, we have changes. We have differences reflected in terms of what we know, in terms of what we can do. For example, some of the factors that have played into why there is an increase in our elderly population is because of nutrition, better nutrition, better sanitation, the infant mortality rate, better medical screening. And so with the baby boomers, what you have is a group of persons who have been more involved, more active, probably better educated formally than past groups, and they feel somewhat entitled to demand certain things that maybe previous generations did not feel the affinity to do so.
And Brenda, and let me say to my audience first, before I ask for your response to that, I did ask our guests if it was okay if I referred to them by their first names. So I'm not being disrespectful here. But, what have you found either in your research and in your own living?
I find that those who are the baby boomers are not only more active, they started out exercising, and many of them are continuing to do so. The generation just before the boomers were called the silent generation, so that they weren't as active. But this boomer generation, not only are they aggressive, initially they said, let's not trust anyone over 30. But then they got to be 30, and it changed the picture. So I'm seeing this is the generation that saw the civil rights movement, the assassination of Dr. King, the president and his brother. So they have gone through a lot, and they expect certain things of our society.
Mm-hmm. Darnell, do people say to you, you can't do that. You're not supposed to do that. You're 62. You're supposed to take it easy now. What do you think about that attitude?
I don't get that basically because they don't see me as 62. Mm-hmm. What I'm hearing from the research, and I've looked at that as well, because we have to prepare people who aren't ready for the change as far as being school administrators. The type of persons being hired in schools now is totally different from back in the 50s and 60s when we were in school. And so you're seeing our generation being a generation that was obedient. Now, spiritually, that's going to carry us further. So being obedient is going to keep us from a lot of harm and those kinds of destructive pieces. Then it's going to lessen stress. So the lessening of stress is going to assist with the exercise and being here, being viable as far as a person that can do service. We look at it as service more than work. So when you look at serving versus I work somewhere, that's a different attitude. Now that generation is also assertive. So we are innovative and we're going to stand our ground. Looking at it from the African American perspective, we have seen the past and we, operate in this present, but we look at the future in from a different lens than many of the other generations. Some of them are totally confused. And so you have the Y, the X, and whatever else that they have. It's listed as generations, but there's a lot of confusion. We know the truth. And so those are the kinds of things that's kept us in this status.
So as you become older, let's talk about, Brenda, some of the changes that happen to you physically, and how do you keep your mind active regardless? Because it really does sound like mind over matter more than anything else.
One thing that I have it's a lifelong learner. And I think being involved in your learning process, it does something to the mind, the brain, and also being involved in your church activities will cause you to have the peace that you talked about, the less stress that there's there. So I can see myself as a person who there have been changes, biological changes, psychological changes, because even with my husband and me, our relationship has changed. It's gotten better. So there are things to look forward to in the older age to me than to feel down. Oh, I'm 70. Thank God I'm 70.
Dr. Dancy, you wrote a book called The Black Elderly, A Guide for Practitioners. What's different about African American elder folks that would cause you to write that book?
Well, interesting question. However, we always must take into account context.
Okay.
I wrote that book when I was doing my graduate studies at the University of Michigan. I was commissioned to write it by my department of Institute on Aging at Michigan. What I was asked me to do at that time is to write a book that will enable persons who work with older adults who are African American to help them to become more knowledgeable and sensitive and aware of how to affirmatively relate to African Americans who are older adults. So that was the context of why I wrote that book. Today, and I think some of the things I said then are still applicable to today. For example, one of the unique aspects of being an older adult is what one writer calls triple jeopardy, at least as it pertains to older adults who are female, who are African Americans, who are old. One would even say quadruple jeopardy in being female, African American, old, and poor. So one thing to be old in our society, in a society that has been greatly impacted by our youth, but it's another thing to have the added luggage, if I may use that term, of being poor or being old and being a female. Not to say all African Americans are poor, but we are perceived in a manner that we carry extra luggage along with our being persons of color and how we are perceived as persons of color in our particular society.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Patricia Collins, a feminist, has also indicated that triple jeopardy that Dr. Dancy just spoke of. And she says it's the intersection of those variables that cause us as African American women to feel sometimes in a lower state than those, and that affects our life satisfaction. because of the way we picture ourselves based on how society sees us. So one of the things we want to do with the type of research being done is to do those, find those variables that will uplift African American women to feel proud of themselves. No, I may not have the education you have, but I'm here, I'm a person, and realize they're a person of worth.
So they don't see themselves as elders, as the wisdom, as the holders of the wisdom, and being able to teach and nurture in that way, and the value of that.
Some do. Nikki Giovanni tells the story of, I think the context was Tuskegee Institute or University, where she says in so many words to a college student who was carrying a lot of books, she said in effect, I'm paraphrasing respectfully, that I have more knowledge in my feet than you have in those books. I think a lot of it goes back to one's self-perception as to how you see yourself. So on that note, in further response to your query, I would say that a lot depends upon one's physical activity. That contributes to one's health and one's brains. It depends upon one's diet. That contributes to one's health. It also depends upon one's mobility and socialization, as well as one's spirituality, one's sense of spirituality. Those practices make for one's, as Dr. Moberg would call, one's well-being, one's good health. And that health starts from within. Or as my mentor Howard Thurman would suggest, the health that starts within would be having your inside and your outside as one. I call it a kind of congruency of constancy.
You want to respond?
I want
Go ahead.
to add to these two theologians here from Virginia Union University. As a Christian, I put all things in perspective according to Scripture.
Okay.
And I don't deal with the denominational piece. I deal with what the Scripture shares. And so I've been a student there. I was a volunteer chaplain for 25 years, so I dealt with a lot of folks who had some real issues serving them. But you have to listen. Now, I think sometimes we've forgotten a lot of our roots because there's some things that we can't negate, which is heritage. Our physical makeup is contingent upon some gene pools and some heritage. So we have a lot of things that cause us, regardless of our intake, to have some issues to deal with. But scripturally, you have to deal with the heart and the mind. And so because we're spiritual beings, we need to understand that that thought pattern needs to come from there. So we do have the wisdom, but we need to apply it. So as far as senior citizens, mature citizens, elderly, whatever term you want to use, you need to look at scriptural pieces. And so I quote when I'm writing as a professor people, but when I look at practical life, I look at what Scripture says. So one of the wisest persons is Solomon. And so Proverbs for the Old Testament and, of course, James for the New Testament gives you that wisdom. And so it's, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise in Proverbs 6:6. Look at just God chose the probably the smallest creature that we can kind of visibly see and said, look at that ant. And so there's some things, and we just don't look at those things now. Our church is kind of moving away, all churches, because, they're not just African Americans that are going to be listening to the show.
Sure.
And wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, but with all you get and get understanding. So then you talk about critical thinking, and you're talking about just thinking outside the box. So that's what we're talking about when we deal with that. So a lot of times we don't look at Bloom's taxonomy and look at those higher levels. So that's what we deal with in math and computer science, Common Core and all that. We're looking at pushing our generation now to think as the world thinks. Seniors can't negate themselves from that. We have to also move along with technology, move along with the things that's going on.
And I'm
See?
glad you brought up the technology piece too, because I'm wondering from each of you, your own experiences in keeping up with technology and social media, and does that intimidate, or do you figure you need to jump in there, and if you're going to remain relevant, you've got to get in there and figure it out?
I'm around it all the time. Remember, I was the chair of
Yeah.
math and computer science. I'm around young folks who have moved from this phase to this phase, and I'm just observing. Because, we are not born into that generation where they are. So they are tech natives where we are not,
Do you have Facebook
So we have
page?
no, I don't mess with Facebook, Twitter, or any of that. I just text and do some things, but because I think that there's some things for some loopholes. If I were to break into your house, now you got to understand, I did jail ministry. I could break in your house just going on Facebook because you're saying, I'm going here, I'm leaving here, and all. Oh, I got your address. Okay. You go and leave all those diamonds that you have. I go over there and collect all that.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Also, as far as the wisdom piece, for African Americans, one of our core values is spirituality and religiosity. So a part of that wisdom we have gotten from our parents and grandparents that poured into us so that we would be able to have strength and resilience to go through the different problems and situations that we have gone through in the course of being African Americans in America.
Do you find that seniors become more spiritual, more religious as they go along? In other words, if you didn't have that foundation when you were, in your 20s and 30s, and you were kind of out there and hanging out and so forth, as you get older, does that change for you?
I'm finding that the literature has said that older African American women are more religious, but I would give to Dr. Dancer to answer that.
Joseph, what do you think?
Well, that has been a running question of some debate. However, what we have noted is that for those persons who have received spiritual nurture from the knee of their loved ones, as they have matured, the religion has become more meaningful for them. Dr. Koenig out of Duke University, in one of his books, Aging in God, talks about the fact of the spiritual needs of older adults. And he cites about 13 or 14 spiritual needs of older adults. And the first one he cites is meaning and purpose. So older adults do look for meaning and purpose. Some come with a history of having that from their parents' knee, and some may not. But as one gets older and has to face the reality of their eventual death and dying, I would suspect that a number of older adults tend to look at or give serious consideration as to what will be the glue that holds their lives together, what will be their faith premises upon which they would stand. But for some, I would say, the literature would say that more and more as people get older, they have to face what they may have been putting off, and that is seeing themselves beyond getting older, but going on to their death and dying.
So it really becomes more of a conscious thought of what death is about, and preparing for that.
Trying to. Theologians like Henri Nouwen would say that it's healthy for us, that all of us should look at death, because once you have faced death and have come to accept it, then you can begin to live. But that's the challenge. We don't want to face it because we have gone through life, through our respective Ericksonian stages, putting it off. And that's why some folks find it difficult and challenging, or do not want to work with older adults, because older adults remind them or remind us of ourselves. Because regardless of your station and climb in life, all of us will get older, and all of us will face death and dying. Because what? Aging is universal, it's intrinsic, and it's not a disease, and it's normal.
And go ahead, Brenda. You have one more comment?
I thought about what Dr. Dancy just said in terms of Erik Erikson and how he says on the last stages of life, how you come to get a feeling of, I'm all right. I did what I could do. It's a settlement so that you can move forward with a peace, knowing that you've done your best. And I think that's good for the seniors of today. There ought to be focus groups where they can come and reminisce and tell their stories rather than being told their stories by others.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have a little different piece to share.
Okay, hold on, Dr. Dancy. Go ahead.
Again, again, when I look at life, I apply it through lens of Scripture. Mm-hmm. Remember your Creator in the days of your youth, not when you get older. Mm-hmm. You remember, because then all of those fallacies, you avoid those fallacies. Some folks think that at a prayer meeting, those good testimonies are all that dirt you did. The better testimonies are you didn't get in that dirt because you remembered your Creator. You followed those guidelines that Scripture had to say. So I look at it, when I look at some of the philosophers that we quote, they weren't Christians. And so then that information is in error. And so when I look at scriptural guidelines, I see those things, because when I studied all the math, all the science, all the administrative things, I looked at it through the lens of what the Scripture said, so I wouldn't go into that error, because that error is going to be there. I'm saying, who's the person that's all-knowing?
Yeah.
And so then you follow that guideline, because if not, you fall into a lot of traps. And so that's where our students, our children, need to be led to. We need to be the leaders. Now, people misquote, and a little child will lead them. That's not even talking about today. That's talking about millennial reign. But then people get mixed up. The older generation should lead them. Constantly, it shares that the counseling comes from this older generation. Young men are for war. Older folks, senior citizens are for counsel. So we should counsel them.
Counsel them there. If you're just joining us, we're talking about the growing senior population, what they want out of life, and the challenges they face achieving their goals, with our guest, gerontologist and theologian, Dr. Joseph Dancy. Brenda Miller, a senior who works every day and is currently working on her PhD, which focuses on living life as a senior, and Dr. Darnell Johnson, another senior who gets up and goes to work every day in his role as a professor at Elizabeth City State University. So let's talk about some very practical things that happen as you become a senior. You know, first you get your AARP card, right?
At 49.
At 49. But in terms of health, what do you need to do? And what are some of the things that you should be thinking about from a male perspective and a female perspective? So I'm going to start with you, Donnell. From a male perspective, as you're growing older, what are some of the things you need to think about in terms of your
Continue
health?
to be active.
Okay.
I was a scholarship athlete, and so those practices were in line. But as you age, there are things that you do in terms of phonetically, and then finesse is used. So I think one of the things that contribute to what we're doing, as far as Mrs. Miller was stating, we didn't work as hard as our former generation. I was born in North Carolina, and I remember
we didn't work physically work.
I physically worked when I went back to assist with the chores for my father's older sister, my mother's older sister, chopping cotton and tobacco and all that. I was talking about physically hard work. And then my dad did some work on the side. He was in the military, but he did some construction work. And I, being the youngest of three boys, I did all that hard labor. They did the finesse work. So then when I got my degree, I started not doing so much physical work. So then that adds to some problems, because you're not using those calories and using those muscles. So those are things I've done, pretty much teaching and then administration. So for the last 20-some years, I've been doing administrative work. So I'm sitting down. So that causes a problem. So we have to eat right and not do the fast food thing and all that, as far as an African-American male. So we have to continue our trek on doing right physically.
Okay. Dr. Dancy?
I would have to say, regarding the matter of health, refer to what I cited earlier. First of all, it's important to have a good sense of self-awareness. The psalmist says, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. So therefore, we have to do good temple maintenance. That starts out with good nutrition in terms of what we eat and how we eat. It also goes on to the scientific basis for exercising the body. It also goes on to the matter of spirituality, which includes meditation, solitude, and silence, and also practicing our faith and service. And it also goes into good social interaction. Man, as John Donne says, does not live by bread alone. We must have good, healthy interactions. And finally, we also must have good mental stimulation, reading good books, doing crossword puzzles, staying active. All of these factors contribute to, in the holistic sense, not in the disease sense, having good health.
Okay.
Preparing ourselves in a preventative way. And for African American men, this all means that we do not go to the doctor just when we feel pain. We go periodically just to stay healthy and having a good checkup. Many African men, or at least there are those African men who don't want to go to a doctor, will only go when they are pressed to, when they are in pain or really hurting.
And they also need to go have that prostate cancer check
Amen
done.
and amen.
And we will say that again and again because I can hear Charlie Hill in my head with the prostate cancer forum here in this area, really pushing for African American men to make sure that they have that test done. From a woman's perspective, Glenda.
I think that if you look at the bio, psycho, social, and spiritual aspects of a woman, I think about physically, it is vitally important that women get their mammograms and all the other exams that are yearly that's necessary for their bodies, especially seniors. Also, when I think about psychological...
Let me stop you for just a second because it just reminded me. I've heard some senior women say, especially when they get to your age, 70 and above, well, I'm not doing that mammogram again. I'm not doing that pap smear. You know, I'm past all that. Your response?
I would say don't play with your life. And that's what you're doing. If you don't go to find out if there's something, you would have a better sense of relief when you know that it has been checked and you're all right. And you're also a gift to your family if you can do that, rather than just playing by chance that maybe it will or maybe it won't. Go and have it checked out, and then if you need the treatments, go forward.
If I may add to that, the other factor to bear in mind is that older adults, in terms of their health, suffer with what is called your more chronic illnesses. And your leading chronic illness diseases have to do with matters of cancer, stroke, and other cancer and stroke at least. And I think 6th or 7th on the list is Alzheimer's disease. So therefore it becomes, and also the literature says that older adults are persons who frequent the doctor regarding their health care. With the growth of the elderly population in our society, that's going to come even down harder, because that group that's 85 plus, because women tend to live longer than men, that group that's 85 plus, my gracious, they're going to be stomping at the doors of doctors' offices and health clinics for needs. And the challenge we have in our society is how will we and can we address those needs in an adequate way, because the demand will be great. Because many medical doctors, when you look at the various subspecialties that they can go into, are not going into geriatric medicine.
Geriatric medicine,
Because why? It doesn't pay as much as well as the other fields. So we have some challenges before us in our society with the growth of the elderly population, especially with women, and health concerns, and how will these health concerns be addressed in policies and in services.
Dr. Khadijah Jordan is a board-certified OBGYN whose patients range in age from 4 to 98. And she also has a few helpful hints for seniors regarding their health.
Dr. Jordan, what are some of the things that seniors should know that can help make their lives a little easier, especially when it comes to their health?
Well, the most important thing is to be prepared for your doctor visits. But one thing seniors can do is bring someone with you. If there's no one available, ask your provider, whether it's a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant or the doctor, to make a conference call to that family member, because bringing them in helps them just in case in the future they need to help you. Take your insurance card to your visits. Also take your medication formulary to your visits. And that way, at least if you have your formulary and your doctor and you are deciding to begin a treatment, they can choose with informed information what's the most or least expensive and avoid the most expensive. When you have medications, make sure you carry all of the medications you're taking, not from just that one doctor, but from other physicians as well, to make sure that all of your doctors know what the other doctors are prescribing. But if you don't take your actual medication bottles, at least know the drug name, the dosage, and the frequency. Just how much are you taking, how often are you taking, and what's the dosage of that medication. But take a notepad, take notes. Don't be afraid to ask questions. And in between visits, write down your questions so that when you do have your visit, all of your questions will be addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What are some of your suggestions for keeping those medications straight and making sure they are taken on time?
One of the most successful means that I've listened to a lot of seniors say that works for them, keeping a folder that has your medication information, your insurance information in it, but also just obtain a little pill box. And the other thing I was mentioning is about skipping medication. There's no reason anyone should skip a medication. We should make sure that we're honest with the physician. If that medication is too expensive, say something. But if you don't understand anything, a management plan, a medication, and your physician's just talking, or they talk faster than I do, or you just didn't hear it, then ask them if they could repeat it or if they could phrase it a different way. Ask them if they could just slow down for 1 minute. Could you just say that another way? And you make sure you understand.
Some very practical advice, Brenda.
Yes, I do. The other thing I would like to interject here is that some seniors go through depression, and therefore, it should be a way in which they would be able to have therapy, because sometimes what is considered, they may think it's a medical problem, might be a psychological problem. And so therefore, I could see our country coming into comprehensive centers where not only would an elderly person be seen by the medical doctor, but also by the social worker or psychologist, in order that those issues that they have can be addressed.
One thing I'm going to ask each of you, and whomever wants to answer this question, but I'm curious as to whether you think the trend that there is now for assisted living, senior homes, senior communities where everybody is 55 and above, is that a good thing, or should seniors really try to react and interact with people of all ages so they can keep their minds sharp also? Who wants to take that first?
I just wanted
to
add something that was said by both Mrs. Miller and Dr. Dancy. Again, there's some. Again, if I have a Ford, I have to take it to a Ford dealership for repair, spare parts, or anything. And again, because of our creation, we need to understand who we need to go to. Just having a wife replaces the mother that's going to keep us on track. Because you're stating, and I know the research shows that women are going to live longer, especially in the African American community. That knowledge and the caring is going to be there for males. But the women also have a role to pass that down to younger generations of women,
so that they will learn to nurture
and do those things, because this younger generation of women are totally different from that senior generation that we were accustomed to. So those kinds of pieces brings the love and the nurturing and that sense of family, so that you won't need oftentimes as soon as possible. You don't need that senior care center, or you do have some nurturing even if they're placed there, because that is a problem, not having the whole family there. When you look at some cultures, that whole family is there. You look at a Chinese.
And it used to be the way it was
Right.
before in our community also.
Right.
But now everybody's kind of scattered.
Right.
all
But
over
even
the
if you go
place.
to a Chinese restaurant, you would notice that the seniors are served first. Children are now learning that the babies aren't taken care of first. We do it the opposite way because, again, we need to learn the nurturing and the respect for culture and respect for seniors.
What do you think about the seniors living?
I'm thinking that a number of seniors would like to age in place. That is, in their home, and if they have grandchildren who come and visit, or children who come and visit. But the aging in place gives them their own space. They know that surroundings. They're familiar with the neighbors and so forth. So I'm thinking that the government should do more things that would assist them in being able to remain in their own homes, whether it's sending in a nurse periodically, whatever the resources they may need in order for them to find their comfort zone.
And you
right
think
there.
that probably as we move forward with more people becoming seniors, that may in fact be one of the solutions in terms of care?
I believe so.
Dr. Dancy, your response.
Um,
We were talking about living in senior homes or senior communities as versus staying within the general population. Is that more detrimental to a senior or more helpful?
with seniors, you have individuals. With individuals, you have different respective tastes and preferences. So therefore, what has to be considered is the needs of the seniors. Aging in place, as Ms. Miller cited, is an excellent example for the good health of an older person. But that assumes what? That the resources are there or the resources are accessible. So seniors have choices. So seniors need to be aware, or their advocates need to be aware of what choices they have for them. To allude to what the gentleman said earlier about, well, first of all, we must remember that historically in our society, women tend to be the caregivers in many of our families, for they are regarded in our society as the nurturers. But the challenge we have is that mama may live in one buckle over shoe, but the children live in another state too.
Mm-hmm.
And so the children are concerned about the welfare of their loved one, but that loved one is not open to coming to where you live, and you have a job and trying to raise a family, and you're not desirous of going there. So we have to look at the needs of the individual and what options are available and what can we afford to do and what sacrifices are we willing to make to provide what's best for the health of that person. But I would concur, in terms of the research that we now know, aging in place is one of the better resources because why? One is at home, where you're familiar, where you have a sense of identity, where you have some measure of control and autonomy, and if you have access to the resources, persons to help you repair your broken fence door or whatever, then that helps for it. Because being in your own home that's pleasant and positive for you can contribute to your health and well-being.
Okay.
But that comes to an individual matter in looking at what are the options. Some seniors do not want to be just with just seniors. They want to be in a situation where they are integrated with other people as well.
Mm-hmm.
And other seniors want to be in a segregated situations as such because what? They don't want to hear any baby cry or young people doing what disturbs them.
Exactly. Now, we've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to give each of you a minute to just say, what would you want to tell a young person about being a senior? What do you want them to know? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Dancy.
I would say two things. One, consider the field of gerontology in light of the growing demographics, for there's much opportunity for you in specialization.
Okay.
And two, in looking ahead, count each stage of your development as a blessing, because each stage of your development prepares you for where you're going to go.
Okay.
As Kobe would say, the end is in the beginning.
That's Dr. Joseph Dancy, gerontologist and theologian. Dr. Dancy, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate this conversation.
My joy.
Okay,
Thank
and
you.
Dr. Darnell Johnson, what would you tell young people?
I would tell young people, since this is going to be airing during a time of sharing, get to know your family.
Okay.
Get to know your family. Just spend time with the family.
Take down some of that history.
Take some of that history and that wisdom and that love and sharing. Get to know your family.
Okay. And that is Dr. Darnell Johnson. He's a senior who gets up and goes to work every day, as his role is professor at Elizabeth City State. Elizabeth City State University. And last but not least, Ms. Brenda Miller. What would you tell young people?
I would tell them to volunteer to work with some seniors. If you're afraid, get the feel of what it's like to be a senior. Let them share their stories with you. That would embellish your life if you'll take the time and volunteer to be with them.
And I would imagine all of you would say, keep on living, as my aunt used to say, just keep on living. And, you know, one saying my mother always says to me, and she is close to 80, but not quite there yet, but she always says, you're getting older, never old. Mentally. That's what we have to keep that. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
you.
And we will be right back.
I'm with Marcellus, and you all are checking out Another View on WHRV 89.5. Don't go anywhere. Check us out.
And welcome back. It is our goal and pleasure to bring you stories of the many positive things going on in the African American community. And it's particularly rewarding when our work is recognized by our peers as the best of the best. That's just what happened with the story you're about to hear. It was August of last year when our Lisa Godley spoke with Claude McKnight, the founder of the a cappella singing group Take Six, as they celebrated 25 years in the music business. The story caught the attention of the National Association of Black Journalists, who awarded it their 2013 Salute to Excellence Award for Best Feature Story. Take a listen.
It's hard to believe that almost 25 years have passed since Take Six captured our attention with their harmonious sound. Over the years, they've recorded 10 albums, netted 10 Grammys, and performed with music legends like Ella Fitzgerald, Quincy Jones, and Stevie Wonder. So I asked the man responsible for bringing the talented sextet together, Claude McKnight, who was his favorite artist to work with.
I would have to say the many times that we've worked with Stevie Wonder, each time is better. You know, it's different and better than the last. So probably our collaborations with him have been some of my favorite work that we've done. And then again, to reiterate, working with Quincy is an incredible experience because you realize that here is a man who's been in this business for 60 years or so now. And he's worked with everyone from, you know, the old classic jazz artists up till today's hip hop artists. So, and he's the kind of guy and the kind of producer that allows the best to come out of you.
McKnight is the brother of singer Brian McKnight. He formed the group in 1980. Back then, there were only 4 members. All were students at Oakwood College in Huntsville, Alabama, and they called themselves the Gentleman's Estate Quartet. The 4 were soon joined by Mark Kibble and Mervyn Warren, and the Take Six sound was born. But the name was not. They called themselves Alliance. 3 members of the group left after graduation. That's when Alvin Shea, Cedric Dent, and David Thomas joined the group. It wasn't until they signed with Warner Brothers in 1987 that they discovered the name Alliance was already being used. As a result, they chose Take 6. During the group's 25-year history, they've covered a broad cross-section of music, not only gospel, but jazz, R&B, and pop.
Now, Take 6 performs so many different genres of music. What's your favorite?
Wow, that's a great question. I think because there are 6 guys in the group and we tend to do harmonies that are more in the jazz genre, that's probably my favorite.
McKnight says the secret to their longevity, first and foremost, is that they've always considered their craft a ministry.
So no matter what genre of music we dabble in, it's always been something that, from a spiritual standpoint, has been bigger than us. So we try to stay out of the way as far as that's concerned. Now, from a human standpoint, and just from an emotional standpoint, you have to like and love each other.
I asked Claude McKnight what Hampton Roads can expect when Take 6 performs with the Virginia Symphony in September.
They can expect to get the same kind of energy that we do in our a cappella shows, just adding more instrumentation around it. I think it's a really great experience, and we've had a lot of really positive and great feedback on it, because sometimes you don't know when you go outside of what it is that people know you to do, if they're going to really enjoy this new thing, in quotation marks. But I think for us, because we're always trying to push our own boundaries, we try to push the boundaries for our audience as well.
He offers this advice to anyone interested in pursuing a career in music.
Don't do it because you want to make money. Don't do it because you want to make hits, because you want to be popular or whatever it is. Do it because you love doing music. That way, you will continue to learn your craft. At the same time, if you love it, it's never going to be a job. It's always going to be something that continues to get back to you.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
And Take 6 is the most awarded vocal group in history with 10 Grammys and 10 Dove Awards, just to name a few of their many, many accolades. And our congratulations again to Lisa Godley for that NABJ Excellence Award. If you like today's program and you want to hear it again or share it with a loved one, simply log on to our website at anotherviewradio.org. There you'll find all of our past episodes. Next Friday is one discussion you will not want to miss, when we'll talk about why so many Black women don't work out. Be sure to be a part of the discussion when our panel of hairstylists and fitness experts discuss your hair or your health. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on our Facebook page or our webpage at anotherviewradio.org. For producer Lisa Godley, audio engineer Victor Bowen, I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. Thanks so much for listening, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.